Okay, now we are going to nature tech, which was my personal journey over the last 4 years. Since the name NOAH suggests we have to save animals, and when COVID came and I had a bit of time on my hand, I looked into nature tech. And luckily, I came across Holt, who invested in a company called FLINTpro. Yes. And Tina recently took the CEO position coming from the S&P ratings industry, which gives us some hope. The serious money people are moving into nature. But FLINTpro is really a fantastic startup from Australia. And I give it over to Tina and Holt. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. So Synovia Capital is an investment platform that only does one thing in slightly different flavors. We invest in information technology companies that are trying to solve two big problems. One, climate change in the land sector, not energy, just only land, which is, by the way, about 30% of all emissions. And then we also try to find information technology that helps you understand the degradation of natural resource extraction areas. So sustainable resource use from land and climate emissions from land. And so we built up a portfolio of companies doing that, one of which is FLINTpro, which was our first investment. And Tina joined about a year ago as CEO. And with that framing of the problem, maybe you'll tell us a little about FLINTpro and what it's doing.
Thanks, Holt. So as Holt said, I joined FLINTpro about a year ago. And I'd love to start by taking the problem statement a little further into how our product's solving for that. So as Holt said, we really focus on the land sector. And so I like to describe what we do is around providing the essential data and analytics for every layer of the land sector that you might have. So what does that mean? That means we look at deforestation risk, we look at biodiversity risk, we look at emission scope 1 and 3 risk on that piece of land that a corporate, financial services, government, or carbon project developer might be either owning directly or have some investment interest. So that's a kind of a quick snapshot. What I will say is that we have a tremendous technology capability across the aggregation of various data sets that are essential to measuring these different types of risk, and then layering in critical models that are built by our highly expert science team that then are able to create these very specific use case outputs for different aspects of the market, as I mentioned, and we can talk a little bit more about that.
Well, one of the things that we found was a big problem at the beginning of this investment was there were a lot of companies putting maps out that would tell you where carbon stock was or where biodiversity risk was. And they'd give you a point in time of a risk and you'd try to make something out of that. And that just wasn't enough. And the companies, the governments, the corporations, the investors were struggling to say, okay, you're giving me a great map, but what can I do with this? And so the difference between a map and a system is really important. I don't know, Tina, if you want to talk a little about FLINTpro and how it takes those maps and does things with them.
Yeah, so as part of the problem statement out there right now for corporates, especially corporates and financial services, I'll talk about specifically because the landscape is rapidly evolving around the policy and regulation and around the technologies that are being introduced into this space. And so if I'm a corporate right now, I'm probably feeling overwhelmed across both that combination of, wow, there's a lot of new technologies coming out, and I have to deal with a lot of different policy changes. So how do I handle this? And I think the best way to think about FLINTpro and our technologies and capabilities is that we are an aggregator. We curate various data sets. We help a corporation make sense of what data sets they really need for the particular type of regulation policy and or projects that they want to run to help them get to their net zero and climate mitigation plans. And I think that's a really important part of this is we simplify a very complex policy and regulatory environment as well as a very crowded data technology space around this.
What this week you've been there a year and you're releasing your first product after a year's development that's a regulatory product. So what does a company do with this?
So what I'd like to, a way to introduce sort of our new product. So first of all, I couldn't be more excited. I feel like getting up and dancing a little bit about launching this. It's called Reg IQ. And as I mentioned, the customer journey right now around land-based emissions and nature-based solutions is very complex and crowded. And so what we're trying to do is break down the problem space for the end user, the corporate, the financial services organization. And so our Reg IQ product does that in 3 stages. First and foremost, we help that client understand their baseline. So essentially do due diligence on their land sector. So that's the first step. We help them understand it. We get the right data sets together, curate those data sets. Then the second thing we're going to do with them is help them understand what do they want to do around regulatory disclosure, whether they want to do it around voluntary commitments or actual policy and regulation that's in place for their geography. We help them understand how they report and disclose. And then the third part of the progression for them in stage 3 is how do we help them actually design mitigation plans or intervention plans. For example, if I'm a large corporate with a very complex supply chain, helping them understand the different aspects of commodities against their supply chains and what their risks are there and how they can have impact and positive solutions going forward. If I'm a financial services organization, I have a large loan portfolio with land sector assets. Again, helping them understand the risk of deforestation on those farms that are in their loan portfolio. We can help them, as I said, understand the regulation or policy, and then help them as they're working with their farmers on how they might want to do interventions to reduce the emissions profile of those farms. So as they go through these 3 stages, our Reg IQ product is there to help simplify. As we are helping them understand their regulation, we're helping them distill the data and models that they actually need to deliver on those use cases, and then help them go forward with the monitoring of impact and change. That's a really important part because this is a medium to long-term market. This is not a do this once and you're done. This is a how do you do this on an ongoing basis for years to come as we continue to work on the climate change problem. And so companies are going to need to have that credible, consistent data for years and a system that can deliver it to them.
But FLINTpro, I mean, there's 2 kind of conflicts in trying to sell a product for that solution, as a solution into that problem. One is you've got this global group of companies operating internationally. How do you pick where you're going to work? You operate globally at the moment. So what drives you for focusing on a certain region versus somewhere else?
So first I'll say the company is, even well before I joined, has done a lot of work throughout the globe. And one of the reasons that I joined FLINTpro was to work with a very expert science team who built a lot of the policy and regulation years ago and actually built the carbon accounting system for Australia. And so the team and our technology and data sets are at global scale from the history of the work that they've done, right, and kind of going forward. I would say one of the key aspects of what we can do for companies, especially companies with a global footprint, is we can provide them globally consistent data sets. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, if there is a specific geography or regional customization, we can bring in more specific regional data sets as needed. Yeah. So an example there might be in Australia, their deforestation policies are different than another part of the world, so we can help them understand that and bring in the relevant data sets.
So I know we're running out of time, but there's a lot of interest in the biodiversity area. How easy or hard is that to add to the system?
So first of all, because we're an aggregation tool, we can bring in a lot of various different biodiversity data sets. As part of our Reg IQ product, we are launching a biodiversity module where we're focused on being in line with the TNFD guidelines that came out last year. And we have, again, our first set of impact and dependency benchmarks that we can provide out to companies based on global data sets, but we can also, as we work with different clients, bring in more local data sets, especially in the biodiversity world, as it's going to have a lot of different local complexity over time.
Great, thank you. Super, thank you, Marco.
No, you run out of time. Thank you so much. No, and you will generate revenues from these corporates. Are they going to spend money to know what harm they did to nature? TNFD, the non-financial disclosing task force, when they came out with the methodology, the whole world collapsed. Hey, they are only worried about the impact the nature has on the corporation, right? And they didn't include the indigenous and, well.
No. But you're going to see,
you're going to clean up.
yeah, we'll see a direct correlation to the size of the spend on the products like this with the size of the penalties if they don't. So right now they're working out the penalty structure.
But let's pray for suitable regulation and that it gives you the tailwind you need to become the next unicorn. We need one of these nature tech
Thank you,
Thanks,
Marco.
Marco.
unicorns. Thank you so
Good
much
to
for
see you.
coming.
Good.